And I'll just turn on the recording, but I'll just make you host.
Yeah, that's fine. I want to. No problem.
Steve go. Beautiful, thank you. Yeah, so and sometimes it's a bit alarming when we find like 70-90% of people, like in all the studies in America, sort of show that they don't practice in the faith when they're 30 as much as they did in Sunday school. Now, you may ask, or is that Coptic Orthodox data? No, it's not. We don't actually have data on our church. I think someone is drawing. So I think I have to enable. I think you could enable that from your end, Steve, the disabled annotation, just in case someone accidentally does that. Thank you. We don't actually have data for Coptic Orthodox Christians anywhere, really. It's more anecdotal. And anecdotally, it does seem like a lot of people that grow up in Sunday school and that come to church every week may sort of go on a different path when they're 30, or even when they're younger, in their 20s. And of course, sometimes it causes a little bit of an alarm. Now, it's hard to know why people leave. It's easier to know why people stay, because people leave for a number of reasons. And what we mean by leave, again, that means different things for different people. So today we sort of want to have a little bit of a discussion on, okay, how can we as a church, and the church means servants, families, priests, congregation, how can we all work together to really foster a faith that lasts beyond adulthood? Not a faith that lasts in Sunday school and youth, but lasts longer than that. Yeah. I want to start with a story of one of my favorite desert fathers, Saint Isidore the priest. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. He's usually in the icon with Saint Moses the Black or Saint Moses the Strong. Saint Isidore the priest's body is with Saint Moses's body in the bottommost monastery. We actually don't know much about Saint Isidore the priest. There is about 10 collected sayings for him, and what we know from the story of Saint Moses the Black. But this saying here really sums up what we know about him. Let's read it together. It was said of Abba Isidore, priest of Scetis, so Wadi Naturun, that when anyone had a brother who was sick or careless or irritable and wanted to send him away, he said, "Bring him here to me." Then he took charge of him, and by his long suffering, he cured him. A brother here means a monk or a novice. Yeah. So he was known as the person that you send any monk that's giving the rest of the monks a tough time. Maybe they're difficult, maybe they're short-tempered, maybe they're causing problems. And Isidore the priest changed them by his patience and his long suffering. And we all know the story of St. Moses the Black and how he went to St. Isidore dozens of times in a night with temptations, and St. Isidore reminded him of the strength that we have as Christians. So I want you to keep this story in the back of your mind, and we're going to look at it at the end again. Okay? So think of St. Isidore the priest and his personality, and just keep that in the back of your mind. So what are we going to do today, God willing? We want to talk about, what does the faith journey of a person look like? How does someone grow in faith? Then what is the role or influence of the family? And then what is the role of the influence of the church? And then finally, let's bring that together and say, okay, how can we support each other? Yeah. What we're going to base a lot of our discussion on is not opinion, but listening. Yeah. Listening through, I put a survey up for our young people last week, and 24 of them responded, and I asked them some questions. So we're actually going to listen to what they said. We're also going to listen to some research. Yeah. Why? Because when we listen to what people are saying, what teens are saying, what families are saying, what mums and dads are saying, what servants are saying, we stop making assumptions. We may have a lot of assumptions, but listening brings us closer. Listening also brings together the generational gap, and it makes empathy possible. We're going to talk about empathy in a second. I love this quote by a guy called David Osberger. Being heard is so close to being loved that for the average person, they are almost the same. So tonight, I'm going to refer a lot to research. And research, essentially, in this area is a bunch of Christians at a university who went and listened, usually through interviews. They listened to teenagers and asked them things that maybe no one else would ask them. They listened to parents. They listened to servants. And not only do they listen, they take what they hear and they dig deeper. And they're like, okay, what's actually happening beneath what they're saying? A teenager said this, but let's dig deeper. What's happening? Yeah. So essentially, when we come to think about service, family, in terms of our young people that we love, we want to put three things together to make us or help us decide what we're going to do. The first is the faith. What do we know from our teachings of our church, from our theology, from the Bible? What do we know about faith? What do we know about church? What do we know about family? With that, we add the research. Why? Because research, as I said, they listened, they analyzed, and then they interpreted. And unfortunately, we don't have any solid research on Coptic youth anywhere. So research is not a survey. Research is someone went and listened and they heard what they said and they interpreted it. Because the problem is, if we just do a survey, is we may hook on one comment that 2-3 people said without digging deeper. Researchers are experts at digging deep and trying to say what's actually happening here. But there's a third thing that we need to add to this. Our experiences with our kids, the kids that we serve, or biological children, the kids that we take care of, the kids that we have in our congregations. So we link our experience, what we see here, with the experience of others through listening, with the faith. And you put all three together, and then I could ask myself, and you could ask yourselves, what now? What does this mean for my son or my daughter? What does this mean for the person who's coming to me in confession? What does that mean for the person that I serve in year 10 Sunday school? What does it mean for the high schooler that I don't serve or they're not related to me, but I see in the pew with me at church? What do all three mean together? Okay, so I thought I'll put that at the beginning just so we're on the same page and that we sort of see what's the point of quoting research and putting that together. Yeah. Any thoughts, questions, comments before we get into it? So feel free, please, to jump in anytime, put something on the chat. I'll share the slides with you at the end as well. So I'll give you a link for that. Okay. Let's start by the faith journey. Yeah. Before we look at the rest. What does the faith journey look like of a person? Yeah. There's a bit of a myth that we sometimes have, which is if we make sure that kids at church and primary school are filled with a lot of spiritual opportunities, then we could hope that in the future there's enough in the tank for them to make it through the rest of their lives. But I think through all of our experiences growing up, we know, well, that is very important. It's not enough. Faith is a noun, but it's also a verb. And tonight we're going to use a word that one of the books used, and I'll show you this book at the end. It's called faithing. Sometimes we think of, do I have faith? Do my kids have faith? And sometimes it's not that helpful because it makes it sound like faith is just like a destination I've reached and that's it. Rather, we want to use the word faithing, which is what? Faithing is the process where each of us, doesn't matter how old we are, we grow and we start to own and embody our journey with God. As we encounter new experiences, new information. So it's a journey. And if we had, like if this was face-to-face, probably easier, but we could share all together some of our faithing growing up. Last year at the Year 12 camp, the servants organized a nice 2-night Year 12 camp at the end of the year. I think some of the servants on here were there. And that night, we were all around in a circle, and we asked them, talk to us about your faith journey from when you were born. It was so fascinating to see the similarities. especially in the teenage years. It seemed like early teenage years is a bit of a haze. What do I believe? Am I just here because my parents want me to be? And then in the later teenage years, there's a bit of a, hey, do I actually believe this? Am I a Christian because I want to be? Or am I a Christian because my parents forced me? Or am I a Christian out of guilt, etc.? It's a journey. And that journey doesn't stop when we're 18. It continues for life. So let's keep the phrase faithing in the back of our mind, right? What's faithing actually about? Faithing is when we make sense of our spiritual journey. It doesn't mean just learning more content, more information. Faith is about quality, not quantity. It's when we believe something and then we're confronted with something else. I don't know about a lot of you, but for me personally, going to uni, I went to the St. Mary's School, was at church on Saturday. So most of my circle was Christian. And then you go to uni and you hear different things. So there's a bit of a interaction between these two things. And there's a challenge, and we're trying to make sense of this. Yeah. Hey, there are a lot of people that aren't Christian, but they're very nice. What does this mean? Hey, there are other Christians that don't believe necessarily what we believe. How does that work? Yeah. What faithing does is it brings things together. It doesn't separate. It integrates spirituality and life experience. What does that mean? When we're younger, sometimes church is this Sunday thing that I believe in. But as we integrate, our religious beliefs form everything. They impact what I believe politically, what I believe socially, what I believe on global things that are happening, how I look at science. Yeah. But if our young people keep their beliefs of the Lord different from their experiences, what ends up happening is there's this conflict. And then you start getting words like versus, science versus faith. They don't integrate it together, but faithing is about integrating. Faith is a lot more than an intellectual thing. It's relational and it's emotional. How many people have found a deeper faith in the Lord without someone talking to them, but when they experienced something? Awe and wonder in the liturgy, compassion and love from another person at church, forgiveness from someone that they wronged. Yeah, it's a lot more than something intellectual. It is relational and emotional. This is a quote from an 18-year-old in one of the books. He said, "The adults in my life didn't tell me what to believe, but how to believe." Now, what he's not saying is he's not saying that his parents and servants didn't teach him the faith. That's not what he's saying. What he's saying is when he was at a crossroad, they supported him on the journey to discover the answer with them. It was a journey, not a, I have a question, here's the answer, boom, this is what you must believe. It's more like, that's interesting. Let's talk about this. Yeah. But when we're faithing, especially in our teenage years and our early youth, and even in our adulthood, a little friend pops up. And this friend sometimes makes us as servants and makes parents uncomfortable. That friend is doubt. Let me ask a question. Feel free to use the actual thumbs up if you've got your camera on, or to use the emoji. Did anyone here have any doubts about their faith when they were teenagers? Did anyone doubt the existence of God? Did anyone doubt if the Bible is real? I remember in year 7, I was thinking like, how do I know Matthew wrote Matthew? How do I know it wasn't made up? And enough people believe it. And then one of my servants said, here, read this Case for Christ. What my servant didn't say, how dare you ask that question? He said, that's interesting. Read this book. And I think in the first chapter, the answer was, I'm like, all right, I'm convinced. Close the book. I didn't even finish it. Yeah. When we're faithing, doubts come in, and it actually invites doubts. It doesn't avoid it. Doubt is actually necessary for our faithing process. And it's important for maturity. Doubting doesn't mean that I don't believe, but doubting means like, I'm struggling with this. Oops. As we grow and we start to integrate our faith with the rest of our life, that brings a struggle. And sometimes it brings a doubt. And sometimes as adults, we get very worried when there's doubt, especially if the questions are a bit, confronting. Like if someone says, how do I know Christians are the only ones that are going to go to heaven? I have a lot of nice people that are atheist or Hindu. Actually, I know people that aren't, someone might say when they go to uni, I know people that aren't Christian that are so much nicer than all the Christians that I know. And we start to get a little bit worried, but that's not, the doubt isn't toxic. Silence is. Silence is the toxic part. If I'm doubting, then it means I actually care. I'm actually thinking about my faith. If I'm not thinking about my faith, there's no questions. Yeah. So when we, in the process of faithing, as we said, and I'm just going to put a couple of tables. I don't mean for it to get technical. And just to make one quick point, and then we'll move on to something a bit more practical. But again, these slides are going to be available, so don't feel like, you have to read it all in one hit. We said faithing has an intellectual, an emotional, and a relational dimension. Let's look at each one. The intellectual says, what do I actually believe? What does it look like when I doubt? It's when my beliefs and my experiences don't add up, and it leads to confusion and questioning. I hear something about prayer and I pray and it doesn't align. I hear something about what the church is and I go to church and I don't see that. I hear something about forgiveness and I don't see that in someone that I look up to. Or I've always believed something about creation, and then I go to school or uni and they teach me something in biology. And I was like, oh, whoa, what's happening here? What young people need, that's the third column, is a space and an opportunity to question, challenge, disagree, and wonder. Now, someone might say, hold on, if we give them a space, that means we're saying that their doubts are okay. The reality is, if we give them a space, if we don't give them a space, they're still going to have that doubt. By shutting them down, what we do is we shove the doubt down inside of them, and they never get an opportunity to take it out and to unpack it together. Okay. Then there's the emotional aspect of faith, which is, how do I feel? When a person doubts, they start to feel anxious or frustrated or overwhelmed. And working through the doubt, though, leads to hope and energy. Why? Because if I've always believed something and then I start to doubt, the anxiety can build up, like, what happens if I was wrong this whole time? What does this mean for my life? What does it mean that I've believed in God and then I'm being challenged? What does it mean that I believed in this and then I'm being challenged? Yeah. What does this need? Time and empathy to grieve and be authentic. In other words, it's okay to feel like that, because as we work through the doubts, there's something on the other side. Now, empathy is a big word that's going to come up today. Empathy means putting ourselves in someone's shoes, or it means noticing what someone is going through and caring through what they're going through. The last aspect is relational. Who do I believe with? So when we grow up, we're baptized by our family. We believe in our family. We belong to a church. But if I start to doubt, then it's like, well, do I belong to these people? Because I remember one youth said, I have questions and I don't know how I feel about these doubts, because I'm really scared that I no longer belong in church because I have these doubts. So there's that tension, yeah? Am I going to be abandoned? Am I going to be lonely? Am I going to be distant? But what do they need? They need people who are committed to them, even if they are saying things that are different. It doesn't mean that I agree with what they're saying, but what it means is, no, I am committed to you as a person. I'm going to walk with you along that journey, even if what you're saying is somewhat uncomfortable for me. Okay. Any thoughts on any of that?
There was a question that came up in the chat. I think when you were talking about the intellectual, it says, when we face doubt from young people outside church questioning God's existence, how do we start the conversation?
It's a really good question, Shireen. I think, though, that's a big question, but I'll just say something small, which is, It depends if the person is inviting a conversation or they're inviting an argument. If the person wants to converse, then we can have a conversation. And there's a lot of good books out there. One's called Timeless Truths for Truthless Times, written by Coptic Orthodox gentlemen in San Francisco. Timeless Truths for Truthless Times. We've got some copies at church. I could give you some once we're back at church. But I guess sort of in where we're going now, the question comes as, well, the question is the person willing to discuss or engage in conversation, or is the person putting it out there to engage in argument? And if it's argument, I don't know how valuable the conversation is personally. If it's conversation, then there's a lot of different starting points that we could have there.
Thanks, Abuna. Jackie, you got something to say?
Yeah, Buna, I was just going to comment. I think it is important that we encourage young people to ask the questions, because then they have the answers to it. Because one of the things that you hear growing up is that you're brainwashed. It's almost like a cult. They're not questioning it. They're just doing it because they're being told to. Whereas if they actually know the answers to these questions and actually think it, then it's a real choice that they're making. They're not being brainwashed or forced along the way, and they know how to answer, which is really important, because otherwise they do go, and we've all been there going, well, are we just doing this because we were told to? Is there something behind it? So I think 100% agree with those comments that you made.
And I guess as adults, aren't we still faithing? Aren't there stuff that we sometimes struggle with, especially when we're going through suffering? Like when we're going through suffering, or a loved one goes through suffering, don't we ask the question, how is God loving when he's allowing this person to go through this? That's a question that we ask. And I think that even that honesty with our young people says, hey, it's not like we have made it and now you're faithing, but we've got there. No, we're faithing together. Yeah. All right, let's...
Sorry, just there's a comment in the chat from Christine. Can Sunday school service challenge the young youth with big questions that are doubtful? This will cover their doubts and get them to open up in a healthy and supportive and spiritual environment.
Christine, I definitely think that's a great idea, but not only Sunday school, but also the home, all of us together. But what that suggests, though, is it means that we all have to be comfortable to maintain a certain peace and patience so that our responses are not from anxiety. Yeah, because it's very normal, like who of us is not, if we love someone and they say, yeah, do you reckon this Christian thing's real? Inside is going to be like, oh, what's happening here? What's happening here? Yeah. But if we give off that anxiety, then it becomes more about how I'm feeling about their question, as opposed to, no, what are you actually saying? What are you actually journeying in? Requires a lot of patience, which is why I sort of put the story of Isidore at the beginning, Isidore the priest, because I think is a good role model for that. All right, let's keep going. So let's have a look at what does faithing look like from middle high school, so year 8 to year 12, and then year 12 to emerging adult, which means just the beginning of uni, and then emerging adult, end of uni, and then adulthood, somewhere between 24 and 30. Okay, from an intellectual level, before I go through that. So this is not scientific as much as it is, again, based on listening. People have listened to a lot of teenagers and young people and sort of said, we've seen this pattern. Okay. It's just before we look at it, in middle high school, or about year 8 to about year 11, faith in God is usually through a person. What it means is it's a bit tribal. If my parents believe, if my servants believe, if my priest believes, yeah, then I'm in that. But then as they grow a little bit older, they start to challenge the community. Why is the church right? Why are my parents right? That's normal, by the way, very normal. And if they're guided through that in a healthy way, it leads to the next part when they're an adult, emerging adult, is I now take responsibility for what I believe and how I think. So it's like Jackie was saying, moving from I believe because my parents believe to my parents believe, they taught me something, the church has handed something to me, I have actually thought about it, and I've come to see that Jesus is the Son of God. Like St. John says in chapter 20, the last verse. Yeah. And then as an adult, it becomes, I believe, and I'm actually okay being around people who believe differently to me. That's not threatening. And I could actually respect that as well. Right? Let's have a look at that. So at the beginning, it's like, I believe because my parents, priest or servant, believes, or what they believe. And then towards the end of high school, it becomes a little bit suspicious, critical. Why do we believe that? How do we know we're right? Are Christians the only people that have got it? And then as they get guided through that, if they have the right environment and those questions aren't shut down by home or church, then they start to construct and test new perspective about their lives and their faith and say, actually, no, this is what I believe. And as adults, they say, I believe because I choose to believe and I trust my thinking. I have chosen to believe, to be a Christian. Yeah. From an emotional level, at the beginning of high school, it's I need to belong to the church, to the family, and I need approval and affirmation from my parents, my servants, my priests. Yeah. As they get to the end of high school, it's like, as I ask these questions, does that mean I'm being disloyal? Am I letting my family down? Am I disappointing my servants? And as they get guided through that, they say, hey, I've actually figured out how I express my faith. And you actually find that they pick up things that they may have left. I love reading the Bible now. The Ekbay is beautiful. I want to go to Tazbaha. Yeah. They used to like Tazbaha, then they don't like Tazbaha, but now they like Tazbaha again. Yeah. And then as a fully formed adult, I'm comfortable with my faith as my own, and I'm also comfortable to be around people who disagree with me, and that's okay. Yeah. Now, of course, I could be 35 and still be in the first column. Why? Because if I've never been challenged, if I haven't seen the real world. But for our young people, they see the real world a lot earlier than I think a lot of us have. Yeah. What about relational? When we're in early high school, it's like, I need a group that believes what I believe. And then it becomes, I need a group of people that allow me space to challenge and question things that I have previously assumed. Yeah. And that's where the home and the servants come in, the environment. There's some space to have these conversations. There's no question that's out of bounds. And that young people are not scared to ask the question, because if they're scared to ask a question, it means silence. If I'm like, I have this question, but I'm really scared to ask my dad or my servant or a Abuna because what's their reaction going to be? Then that's getting quashed down. Yeah. As they go into emerging adulthood, so early 20s, I need a group that helps me explore spirituality. And then at the end, I'm giving back. I'm here for others. It's not about me. We can be a community, even though if we come from slightly different places sometimes. Yeah. I guess the question, though, that may be happening, so this is a journey, of course. A question that might be in our minds is, well, hold on. Where's the role of grace? This seems too calculated. Well, the first thing to remember is what I've just shown you is observations of people who have listened to young people. It's not a formula. Okay. How we take it, again, each to their own. Remember that triangle? You got faith, you got the observations, you got your own experience. Each of us personally in our own life and with the people that we are around. But there's a temptation when we look at all of these things is to think, you know what? It's all on God. We have to do nothing. And another temptation to say it's all on us. And both of these are extreme. What we need is the middle, which is it's God and us, faith and works, synergy. We love that word in the Orthodox Church. We work together. And if we want to work with God together, part of that involves listening. Why? Because Jesus himself listened. Look at the Gospels, how many times he listened to people. He asked questions and he listened. The Samaritan woman, he listened to what she had to say. So part of our listening journey is, hey, we could see roughly that they go from in it because my friends and family and church are in it, eventually to I'm in it because I want to be, but in the middle, there's a bit of this tension. What do I believe? Do I actually believe this? And with the right support, they get to the end. Okay. Any questions on any of this before we look at the parents part? What's synergy in Arabic? I have no idea. Ayman, do you know what synergy is in Arabic?
تكامل يبون, I think.
Like working together. Is that takamul? Yeah, okay, yeah. It's the word that we use in to describe spirituality in the Orthodox Church. God and humanity working together. Faith and works working together, yeah. Any questions, thoughts, comments before we look at the family part? Okay. Let's look at the family. All right.
Abuna, just before you go on, there's just something that's come up in the chat.
Yeah.
Sharif is saying, I usually tell my daughter, think about the Bible. It's an amazing book which question and answer all our doubts. Is it only mentioning good things that happens to people in Old or New Testament? The Bible says and tells us everything good and evil situations without bias to enrich our responsibility and sense of God and existence in everything. For example, how King David made mistakes and he was told about his heart was like God, a book that enriches us with how God loved David and allow a way to return, enhancing his faith.
That's a fantastic example, Sharif, of faithing. Of how, yes, we can go off the path a little bit and we can come back, and how the scriptures are full of many examples of that. Yeah, it's beautiful. Love it. All right. So this is the fun part. I like surveys. Yeah. I asked the teens last week. I sent them a survey to the 10 to 12s and some of the youth, asking them 4 questions. It was anonymous. What's one thing you think your parents should know about what it's like to be a teenager today? And the next question, in your opinion, what is the most important thing your parents can do to help you grow as a Christian? And the same question again, but with the church. What's one thing that you think adults at church, who is the congregation, servants, priests, should know about what it's like to be a teenager youth today? And what's the most important thing they could do? So I've highlighted some of their responses. Okay, let's go through them together. Okay, this is from our teens, yeah? Teens, Coptic Orthodox teens who live in Melbourne. What's it like to be a teenager today? What do you want to tell your parents? A 16-year-old said, it's not easy. I may seem different because there's a lot in my mind, but I also can't express all my feelings or say everything I go through. So this is to mum and dad, yeah? A 17-year-old says, the challenges that we face are different to theirs. There's a big cultural and generational gap that they need to understand exists. Having a conversation with us and treating us like adults helps us respect and open up to parents more. As you read this, please try to look at what they're saying beneath what they're saying. Remembering they're still teenagers. Now, I don't know if any teenagers have crept in on this, but I'll just say it anyway. Their brains haven't fully developed yet, yeah? You have to consider that. Neurologically, they're not fully developed yet. Socially, emotionally, relationally. So read it through their lens in a way. That's what we call empathy, yeah? This is a very common one. An 18-year-old said, it's very stressful to fit in as a Christian in this generation. That's true. I agree with them. It is different to maybe what some of us or some of our parents experienced in Egypt, where at least we were in a religious country. And a lot of the behaviors of Muslims and Christians overlap in terms of what's appropriate and what's not. A 24-year-old youth said the significance of mental health. That was actually a very common one as well. Someone didn't disclose their age. The struggle with sexual purity is much harder than when they were our age. 16, that we don't always tell them what is going on in our lives, and we might seriously be going through challenges and they don't know. Okay. Well, I've got a couple of pages of these. 19-year-old said, the constant dilemma between societal norms and our morals and values. It's not easy, and there's so much around us that can distract us, tempt us, and pull us away from Christ. Society today is so different compared to the times our parents grew up, and sometimes it's just important for parents to understand the challenges that we face and always be there to support us along the way. A 17-year-old, we make mistakes. 16, mental health is a lot more real. Please don't brush it off. Sorry. And if we say that we don't feel mentally well, please don't brush it off. And finally, a 17-year-old said, the way they dealt with things as teenagers back when they were younger is not going to work for the situation that we as teenagers are put in nowadays. Okay. So this is what they said. Does anyone want to summarize what they're actually trying to say? Maybe using 1 or 2 words. What are they trying to tell mum and dad?
Understanding.
Yeah, they just want to be heard.
Yeah.
Understanding. Please
different
understand me.
these days.
Please hear me. Sorry.
Things are different these days.
Things are
Life
different.
is different these days.
Hmm.
Beautiful. Anything else? It's actually quite encouraging when they say, yeah.
Mm.
What are they saying? Hey, just please empathize with me. Atif, you want to say something?
Yeah, well, I think they're struggling more than us.
And like,
Buna,
yes,
sorry, I just want to say something. I feel like the world we live in it now, it's completely different than our time.
yeah,
And I do feel like sometimes I do hear stuff from them, but the thing is like, I can't help them with it because my time is different. And in our times, this stuff used to be like, it's not right. We can't do that. So even like sometimes if they try to let us help them, I can't, I don't know how.
it's a good point, Hannah. And I think the second question I've given the also what they've said for the second question, but I wonder, Hannah, what are they asking us to help them solve their problems, or they're asking for us to acknowledge and listen more?
Acknowledge and listen, I think.
Yeah.
The second one, and understand. And if they come and tell us something, we need to accept it and just be patient and listen to it. Because like the way we raised, it's completely different. It's for us to hear about the stuff. I feel it's too much. Like, I don't know, for me, I feel anxious.
Yeah, I'm with you. I feel anxious too when they say some stuff.
Yes, sorry. But they think, oh, that's what's happening now. Like, this, what is it now? So I don't know. I feel like I need to raise them in different place so they can be all right. I don't know.
Well, and I guess, the comforting thing for us as a church is that we've been here before. We've been in a situation before like this. And that's it's a good point, Hannah. And I guess something that's nice to do is link in, that triangle I put at the beginning, what we believe, what we've heard from about other people, and then our experience. Because the expert is you. You are the expert. Yeah, when you put all three together, everyone knows what to do for, when you put all three together. Even sometimes we might need a little bit of help from different people. But I wonder, are our kids in Sunday school and youth at home, are they asking us to sort of solve the problem or listen with them and sort of faith it out with them, if you want to say?
Jackie's got her hand up. She wanted to say something.
Well, no, I was just going to say, we find it a lot easier when a colleague or friend is telling us stories and it's not our child, for example. We don't feel the urge to jump in and tell them that it's wrong or right or discount it. You actually listen to them because they're not your child, and you try to give your advice and encourage them. And I think that when it's your child or your sibling, it's like, no, that's wrong. You shouldn't be doing that. That's the first impulse. But I find it really helpful to think of them like someone you work with that's not grown up in the church, but is asking questions or is talking about moral situations they're in and how would you advise them? Because it takes that emotion and that panic away from your reaction a little bit. And because we're a lot more patient with strangers sometimes than our own families and our kids, because we think they should know better. And I think, something I have found helpful is that kind of patience that you would give to someone at work or someone that you encounter outside of the house as well.
I think it's a really good point, Jackie, and it's actually exactly what's on the next slide. So I might go to that then, and see if there's any questions that come in. Just feel free to jump in. But before I go to the next slide, I just want to put a little disclaimer. What I'm going to share is again based on other people's listenings, and as you know, I'm not a parent yet, a parent of a teenager. So by no means am I saying, hey, this is you guys are the experts. I just want to share what the experience of those who've listened to a lot of kids and families are. That's all. And then everyone could digest that and see what that looks like for them. Yeah. There was a really, really, really good study that was done over 40 years. A study it's like probably one of the best ones on families. What this gentleman and his colleagues did at a university is in the 1970s, they found a family. They found actually 350 families, yeah? And what did they do? They interviewed Fulan, Mr. So-and-so, in 1970. And in 1980, or a few years later, they've interviewed his son. In the 1990s, they interviewed his grandson. In the 2000s, they interviewed his great-grandson. And they did this for 350 families to say, okay, how does faith get transmitted in a family? Why is this important? Because all the other studies, what they do is they go to teenagers and say, tell me about mum and dad at home. So it's based on the teenager's perspective, which is still valid because we're listening. But what this gentleman did in his study, and the book is called Families and Faith, if you're interested, is he tracked 350 families for 40 years to see, Geddo is Christian, what does that look like for his grandson? And why does someone leave the church and someone leave and come back? And why does this very religious family have children that are not religious? And why does another family have children that leave and they come back? Let's look at a couple of things that he found, okay? He compared families between 1970 and 2005. And in 2000s, a lot of people thought, you know what, the families don't have much of an impact. And he said, actually, that's wrong. Families are really good at transmitting faith. 60% of religious families transmit it. But he also found that families are very good at transmitting non-faith. So if they don't practice, they transmit that. And he looked at what are the different roles or what are the different factors that really help kids develop a lifelong faith. And he found some really interesting ones. One interesting one that I'll mention, but I won't talk about, is grandparents have a really nice role. Geddo and Teta have a very important role when they're around, yeah? But look at this quote. Certainly one factor is parental behavior, such as role modeling and consistent. If parents are not themselves involved in religious activities, if their actions are not consistent with what they preach, children are rarely motivated to follow in their parents' religious steps. Now, I want you to remember this and compare it to what the teenagers we're gonna read from them. They're saying how they could help us, yeah? I just think someone's microphone's off, so it's on, I think reverbing. I don't know if it's coming up on your end. Yeah, I don't know, okay. But what matters most? What matters most in families? What's so interesting is they found the most important factor in faith being transmitted throughout a generation in one family is warm, affirming parents. And this word warm is going to come up a lot tonight. This is one of the quotes from the book. The quality of the relationship between parent and child is a crucial component of the degree to which transmission of religion occurs. When children perceive their relationship with parents as close, affirming, accepting, they are more likely to identify with the parent's religious practice and belief. While relationships marked with coldness, ambivalence, preoccupation are likely to result in differences. Yeah. What's really interesting, and I really like to read this part when I was reading the book, is they looked at why do some youth leave and come back and some leave and they don't come back. Do you know what the difference was? Warmth. If there was warmth in the family, a lot of those who left came back. And they said if there was no warmth, a lot of those who left didn't come back because there was no home base where they could challenge. Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of us know a lot of friends, relatives who went through that phase and their parents were patient, affirming, warm, loving with them, and they came back. Yeah. What was very interesting was this finding. A lot of people used to think that mum is the most important person for raising the kids in the faith. They found that mum actually is important, but so is dad. The role of the father's warmth is important. And they said, if one parent might not be there, grandparents or father role models also have such an impact. But what's interesting in this book that no other book really looked at is grandparents. They found that grandparents actually have a really, really important role if they're involved. But what they found was, even if parents are religious, but they're distant, it doesn't transmit faith. Okay. I'm just going to share two more things and then we'll hear again from our teenagers. This one was interesting. This is about church attendance. This was a very interesting stat. Oh, this is wrong graph. Okay, apologies for that. Hypothetically imagine with me the graph, yeah? They found something interesting. If parents take their kids to church every week, then their children, when they're adults, are 60% likely to go every week. But if they go once a month, the kids are not 60% likely to go to church once a month. They are only 30% likely to go once a month. So if I go every week, my kids are 6% likely to go every week. Again, this is just listening. It's not a rule. It's just information, yeah? But if I go once a month, they're 30% likely to go once a month. And if I go once a year, they're 30% likely to go once a year. So they actually found that the basics of Sunday weekly attendance is a huge predictor of faith. Okay, this is the last thing. What they said is, what's really interesting is that for religious transmission, having a close bond with one's father matters even more than a close relationship with the mother. Emotional closeness with mothers remains important for religious inheritance, but not to the same degree as fathers. Now, again, this is not a rule. All it is a trend. A lot of us know people that maybe dad wasn't around, or maybe dad wasn't invested in the faith, and the kids are very invested in the faith. It's not a rule. It's just a trend, something to listen to and to say, okay, what am I going to do with that? Let's look at what the teens said when we asked them, what's the most important thing mom and dad can do to help you grow as a Christian? This was really interesting. I don't know about you, but I get very excited when I read this stuff. It's nice just to hear what's going on inside, yeah? A 16-year-old said, I think creating a warm environment at home. They use the word warm. I don't know where they got that from. A warm environment at home where prayer is very important. I also believe seeing them pray has made mindset of prayer like a crucial part in my day. Educate us about our religion and the world in a non-sheltering and non-basic Sunday school way, while also acting as role models. Be examples of Christ. Instead of lecturing kids about their wrong, be a candle with the children can get warmth being Christ-like not only at church but in all environments. Be a role model that the children can look up to and learn from, a 16-year-old. Be a role model that teaches the children how to pray, how to fast, the importance of church, but above all, teach them to love Christ. Surround me with Christ, but don't force anything on me. Aren't these answers beautiful? I actually think they're very inspiring and quite encouraging. 25, don't shelter us and let us make mistakes within reason. Maybe do Bible studies at home. I think it will improve our relationship as a family. 16-year-old, amidst hard times, speak to me about faith. Speak to me about saints and miracles. Help me strengthen my faith. Sometimes I can't do it all by myself. Surround the home with God. Attend liturgies together. Have prayer time. Seeing the love my parents have for each other as well as their kids also helps my Christian faith, as their relationship is grounded in Christ. Have family Bible study and religious discussions. Acknowledge that we are different and avoid judgment. Take us to things like Tazbahah, Sunday school, and other church activities. Pray together as a family. Pray with me throughout the day. Okay? I think there's one more. A 22-year-old said this big one. Building a church at home and regularly praying and reading the Bible as a family, not relying on church services alone to assist in spiritual growth, but having these church services at home first and foremost. For example, Bible study, Tazbahah, praying the Agbayah, and even everyday conversations about Christ and in Christ. Reading and learning more together and ultimately growing in Christ together, wherever we go. Together was a big word for this 22-year-old. All right. What's sticking out to you from all of that? What do you think they're trying to say?
I feel like Abuna, they're saying that they want to be supported in their own journeys. They don't want kind of our journey imposed onto them, but they just want to feel that we're there to support them and be around them for their own unique journey that they're going to take.
I love that. I agree. That togetherness, I think, was it. Like I felt like the ing word, the ing, faithing, serving, praying comes a lot. Yeah.
We want to see Christ at home as well.
Yes, that came, and someone actually just wrote exactly that in the chat. Jesus at home, Christ at home. Anything else that stands out? So I tried to summarize what they said in this. What are they saying? Role modeling, church in the home, warmth, empathy, which means I notice what you're going through and I care. So unempathetic means you shouldn't feel like this. You shouldn't be thinking like this. How could you feel that way? Empathy means, oh, that must be hard. Let's talk about it. Unpack that with me. Church presence, invite conversation. Diana is just posting some really nice quotes on the chat from a couple of different books on teens that are really nice. I read this one from Tim Smith. A millennial, which means someone born after 1980, may look like a wild nonconformist, but underneath the bleached hair and the body piercings is a heart that is likely to be passionate about God, country, and faith. What's really interesting, and you guys would know this way better than me because you guys are the experts, as mum and dad. I wonder if we got these same kids who answered this and put them in a room and asked them, do you want to pray with mum and dad, if they'll say yes or no? And that's the thing. And you guys are experts on teenagers, so you would know where this is coming from. But a lot of teenage psychologists say that what they say and what they want is disconnected sometimes. So sometimes when they say, get out, leave me alone, what they're actually trying to say is, I'm really hurt and I'm in pain inside, but please don't leave. But don't we do that as adults? Haven't you ever had an argument with a sibling or a spouse or a parent and be like, leave me alone? And they're like, okay. And they go to the next room, but deep down inside, like, no, please come back. Don't go. Come back. I wasn't serious. Yeah. So keep that in mind. What they say and what they actually sometimes have deep inside might be different. Yeah. So from what they said and from some of the literature, a few things that came out as how parents really help faithing. And again, what I'm not saying is I have the answers, or I know, because I don't know, I'm not a parent. What I'm saying is this is what other people have found. You could add to the list. You could probably subtract from the list as well. You know, just take this into the triangle that we had at the beginning. They said they need a home base, like a launching pad and a place to come back to as well. A lot of them said it's useful to encourage conversation. And there's a magic three-word phrase that some of the servants know, as we were watching a video on this before, which is, one of the researchers said, whenever you're with a teenager and they say something and you're about to interject and solve the problem or say, but, he said, take a drink of water and say, tell me more. Dad, I like this girl and I'm going to marry her. You're going to say, but you're too young. Tell me more. Yeah. I find church boring. I'm drinking a lot of water today. Tell me more. What do you find boring about it? I don't like church. Why? Okay. Not why. Why is probably a bit of a confronting question. Tell me more. Can you tell me a time that you really experienced God? What's your favorite thing to do in church? When they're a bit older, I don't want to serve. So ask them a different question. Okay. If the church employed you full-time and said you could do whatever you want to do for the week, what would you do with your time? We asked this once to the teenagers, and some of them said things like, I would go look for people that never come to church and help them. One of the other youth said, I would do all the admin work that needs to happen in church because I love admin. Someone else said, I'll be a Sunday school teacher because I love just talking to kids. Yeah. So encouraging conversations, but that needs warmth, empathy, and patience. I think, Jackie, you hit the nail on the head with what you said before about what we do when it's someone else and not family. Yeah. Ask questions, but there's different types of questions. Some questions are a bit of a power struggle, like, why don't you like church? They're not the best, but there are other questions like, when do you feel closest to God? What is God bringing to your attention? Or if you had to meet God and ask him one question, what would you ask him? If you had to go back to any scene in the Bible and be there, what would you go back to and why? If you could change something in church, what would you change? And just to listen. Watch our reactions. I think we spoke about that. Bringing them to church on time. So this was an important one. Why? Because they found that very rarely do kids go above mum and dad's church attendance. There's a ceiling. What mum and dad do for a lot of kids, not for everyone, is the ceiling. So if I go to church once a month, it's very unlikely that my kids will go to church more than once a month. They found there's a bit of a ceiling effect, yeah? We already saw how coming to church every week makes a big difference, but what does it mean when the kids never go to church, at least early on? It means that it's not important. What does it mean when Sunday school is given more preference than liturgy? And sometimes it is, unfortunately. You know, if you count how many people come to Sunday school on Friday, Saturday, and you put them in the Sunday liturgy, there'll be no space for anyone else in the whole church. Yeah. As we're going to see this, that doesn't really help with their faith. If I grow up in an environment where my servants or those around me, the adults, my parents, whoever, is okay with liturgy being late or not coming, then I grow up and I say, oh, that must be fine. Yeah, but that's a whole big thing, but just wanted to make that comment. Be connected to the body of the church. What does the body of the church mean? The body of the church is the whole church, not just Sunday school. So if my experience as a teenager is just Sunday school and liturgy, and I leave right after the liturgy, then I'm just being connected to people my age. So before Sunday school came about, the church only had liturgy, fellowship, and the teaching through that. Sometimes our teens are growing up not connected to anyone in the church except their Sunday school class, which is a bit of a problem. Why? Because eventually that Sunday school class goes. And an example of that is when we go to the liturgy and we, like, in 3 minutes, we're out. That means there's no fellowship. And in the early church, and Dr. Emil is our biblical expert, could speak to this. In the early church, the Erepi meal and the liturgy were the same thing, part of the same movement. When now sometimes the experience of young people in churches go to liturgy and leave, they're not being connected to the body. They found in the research that every young person needs 5 people, 5 adults to help them out. It doesn't mean there are 5 adults and all they care about is one person, no. Every young person needs 5 adults apart from mum and dad. Could be an uncle, could be a buna, could be their Sunday school teacher, could be just another tant at church. 5 adults is a magic number. And lastly, finally, most importantly, our faithing is just as, if not more important than what we do with them. Our own faithing, our own journey. Yeah. That's sort of what I took out from what the kids were saying and from a little bit of what they said. Does anyone have any thoughts or comments on this before we look at the church part? Someone's asked a question privately. My son says, don't try any of this stuff on me. I'm too far gone. How do you respond to that? How do you respond when they're unresponsive? I don't have the answer to that because I don't think there's an answer. I'll just share some thoughts. Sometimes the question could be, tell me more. Why do you think you're far gone? Yeah. Did you ever experience God before? If you know, what's the burning question? Having a conversation, yeah? So maybe some of that stuff there. Then there's also the role modeling of, that's okay. We'll ask these questions, but I'm going to continue with my faithing and God will work through me. And that's the grace part, which we were speaking about before. One of the elder monks in a really nice book said, the presence of one person who prays in the house has an impact on the rest of the house. I can't remember who said it. I don't know if it was Baba Shnuda or another bishop who said, it's like nuclear radiation. When you pray, you like radiate it. And when you put a radiating body next to another radiating body, there's a transference that happens, yeah? But there's also a place here for the church, for the servants, for Abuna, who may be able to have a conversation that maybe the kid doesn't want to have with mum and dad, but let's be realistic. There are a lot of things, I'm sure a lot of us didn't want to tell mum and dad. And maybe sometimes we could, just alert our priests or servants, say, hey, do you mind checking up on him or her? But we want to avoid that being the solution. But sometimes, like, I'll just call the servant or Abuna and expect them to solve it. No, we're going to work together. We're all going to work together in this. We're all going to be in this on a long journey. It's a marathon. We're all going to pray about it. We're all going to try be there with warmth and with patience and with prayer, and we'll leave the increase in God's hands. And there are a lot of young people who said exactly what this person said, and they're active servants in the church now. I think someone was about to say something. Okay. Any thoughts before we go into the church part? Okay. We asked the church, the kids, the same question. What do you think adults at church, so the congregation, the people that serve you, your priests, should know about what it's like to be a teenager? Very quickly. Not all of us are the same. Don't judge us or give us generic opinions. It's difficult. Please don't judge us. Our career choices, this one's a pretty funny one. Our career choices or anything we decide to do in our lives, it's extremely difficult trying to please all the amos and tons. We're not failures for taking a different direction in life than they are used to. We also face different issues, and things that weren't common in their time may be something acceptable today, provided it's acceptable within the Christian faith, of course. Please understand that times change. I'm not a fashionista for not wanting to do medicine or wear dresses up to my ankles. I found this one hilarious, yeah? That's like, and again, when we say church, we're not talking about Sunday school. We're talking about the whole church. Yeah, every person in the church has an impact on the other. Yeah, you might say, look, I go to church, I don't serve, I don't have an impact on teenagers. Actually, we do, because that's the concept of the body. Yeah, and yesterday in the youth meeting, we were talking about dating and marriage and things like that. And a lot of the youth were saying it's very difficult for them to come to church when people make comments on, aren't you going to get married? Arbalik. Comments, what this person trying to say is, please stop commenting. Yeah. But I love the Fashla comment. It's actually quite funny. 24. Maybe the idea that our generation tends to ask a lot of questions and analyze a lot. 19. Nearly everyone is struggling with pornography and it's destroying our youth from the inside out. This is to the church, yeah, to the congregation, servants and priests. Avoiding the taboo doesn't fix it. It's like the dragon under the rug that feeds on the crumbs until it gets so big, its presence becomes so undeniable. We need educated people to guide the youth and their parents and confront this head on. It's like no one will address the elephant in the room just because it's awkward. We need to educate our youth about addictions and ways to overcome it in the Christian walk. 19. Emotions are hard and patience and love are needed. 16. Outside the church, we're exposed to so much in society and it makes it really difficult to live the Christian life. This makes the role of the church so important because for many, the church is one of the only places where teenagers feel like they aren't fighting everyone and everything around them. In other words, for a lot of them, church is the safest place they have. 17. We need role models, people who we can look up to and learn from. Life isn't about getting married and having babies. Stop judging. This is 19. Yeah. Stop judging females if we're still single in our mid to late 20s. There's a lot more to life than that. Don't put the pressure on us when we're growing up, and don't make us feel like we're a failure or compare us to our friends who are married. We all learn and grow better together, so there's no need to freak out if you see people interacting with each other from opposite genders, because we consider that as fellowship. Guy-girl friendships are normal. Okay? What are your thoughts from what they're saying? What do you think they're actually trying to say to the congregation and to the adults in church?
They want us to accept them the way they are.
Yep.
Don't judge.
Don't judge, accept us how we are. Very good.
And not everything they do different from what we do is wrong.
Yep, I agree. Some
I
people
think also the commenting. We grow up in a society where our community likes to make comments and make things up sometimes, but also make comments on what they see, and that's not something that this generation is quite used to, because it's not how it is elsewhere. So I think it was a bit of a message about that aspect to it as well.
Beautiful. Anything else?
I think a lot of the struggles here, Abuna, forgive me for saying, are a bit cultural, as opposed to coming from the actual church, you know, the religious part of church. It's more the, you know, our culture creeping in and having that impact their experience of church.
Yeah, I think you used the magic word, the culture. And let's talk about culture for 2 seconds, yeah? I think sometimes we look at culture as like we have to get rid of it from church, or it's culture versus religion. But there's culture everywhere. There's a footy club culture if your kids play footy. There's an Australian culture at Australian churches. There's an Egyptian culture at predominantly Egyptian churches. There's a Greek culture at Greek churches. Culture is not something we could run away from. But what we need to do is bring Christ in to the culture to inform it. And there are a lot of beautiful things in our culture, one of which is hospitality. And we're actually, generally, Egyptians are quite warm. Yeah.
Yeah, Buna, just want to make a comment about culture. And there needs to be an acceptance in terms of, actually, I think kids, teenagers identify with the Coptic Egyptian, even to the Melburnian Coptic Egyptian identity. And that's a good thing. And I think that it's twofold. We should deliberately stop any hurtful comments that are now not acceptable to our youth, like the one that's well, Belik had to go with the MTA. We should deliberately, consciously try to support our youth if they face that from people who cannot help saying it. I'm going to say older people, but even persons who cannot help but make that comment from a very good intention. But still, we should somehow shield the kids and tell them, don't worry about it, forget about it. Haga kida. And we should also promote the culture. Like you said, like if you're going to get down to it, Aussies gossip between each other. Footy club have, you know, all these cultural differences. And we are no different as a culture, as an ethnicity. And we have an identity, Melburnian, Coptic, Orthodox, you know, ethnicity. We should definitely, what you said is just infuse Christ. I'll let you speak about that, of course, to get rid of any gossip, to get rid of any malice or, you know, trying abuse or use. But we should definitely keep the culture and make it adjust to who we are, you know, 2021 Melburnian Copts. Because that's a good thing. The kids identify with that and they feed off that identity. They don't need to. Yeah, we should shield them from any negativity of that culture, and we should also promote it as an identity that's good and that's ready for Christ because it's from, you know, the altar ultimately. What do you think? Yeah.
I like what you're saying, Sharif, and I guess a question that I have is, when we're talking about culture, the church, people that talk, who are these people? Me.
Well, I'm trying to say that it's not. I'm trying to get a cohort here of young adults with teenage children, from what I can see from the group. And I'm not trying to, like, I'm saying we as a cohort of young adults or teenage children, we should be deliberately shielding our kids, teenagers, or even each other's kids or any teenagers from anyone in the culture. I'm going to say older persons who haven't adjusted to the new norm. That's what I was thinking. Older persons. It could be us as well, Abuna. It could be us as well. If that's what you're trying to.
What I'm trying to say is, I just wonder if, when we think about change, we think that a group of other people have to do it. Whereas each of us, I was specific with the question, I wanted the kids to hear the word congregation. Why? Because I think sometimes we and I love what you said, Sharif, by the way. I think what you said was very accurate. I think sometimes we think, oh, the servants will fix this, or the priests will fix this. No, it's actually all of us that have a role in that. The experience of church as body is all of us. And church is a messy place in a good way. We all come with our stuff. We all come with our, my judgmentalism and stuff like that. And that's where the Lord comes in and he grants the grace, the healing, the forgiveness, etc. Dr. Amir, I think you want to say something as well?
Margaret, okay.
Coming from Egyptian background and being an Egyptian mom, sometimes it's actually just polite saying عقبالك when it's a wedding, or البقية في حياتك when it's a funeral. It doesn't mean that we are telling her, why didn't you get married by now? Because we have seen it here, we have seen it in Egypt, and we have seen people who got married and really did not do well in their marriages. So we're not pushing anyone to get married quickly anyway.
That's exactly sort of what I meant.
Being polite, and that's the way we answer. We don't mean to say, why haven't you been married by now? It's being sensitive to us.
But I think the youth member that fed back was really specific in saying that people are saying, oh, why didn't you get married? Like your friend is married, and why have you taken that path? I think it's not from the polite comment about, عقبالك in a polite way. I think they were really specific. Abuna, correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds like it's not in that context. It's people making comments like your friend is married or you're getting older. Why aren't you settling down and things like that? I think it's quite specific.
Yeah. It also extends to the whole career thing. I think they want to feel that what I choose to do in my career shouldn't be a matter of opinion on when I come to the church. The church needs to be a safe space. If I choose to change careers and in a cultural perspective, like personally, I changed careers from one to another. And it was a little bit difficult when I had people at church come to me and say, why are you changing careers? Your old career earns more money, is better than your new one. And thankfully, I had other people that were more supportive that said, don't listen to those people. It's not, their problem. So I think what they're trying to say is specific, like you were saying, Jackie, like when someone says, why aren't you married like your friends? Why didn't you do this job like that? Yeah. Tante Halam, I think you want to say something as well?
I'm okay. I'm okay. Thank you, Abuna.
Sorry, I just saw your hand up. Sorry. That's okay. Okay. Let's keep going. So what about churches? Yeah, because we asked in the church, what do churches do that really helps young people grow in their faith? So a bunch of, again, researchers at a university in America said, we know there's a problem with youth leaving church, but we also know there are a lot of churches that are really good at keeping young people at church. What do these churches do that is so good? So they went and found these churches and they interviewed them. They went to their churches, they visited them, they listened to their kids, they listened to their priests and leaders, they listened to the servants, and they found that all of these churches have 6 things in common. And they found that these 6 things are independent of if your church is big or small, one culture or multicultural. Remember, we're not the only multicultural church. Yeah, a Chinese friend of mine goes to a multicultural Chinese church, and they have similar conversations to what we're having right now. Yeah. It doesn't matter if your church is old, new, beautiful facilities, renting a school hall, these 6 things. I'll just go through them very quickly. Yeah. Just because I spoke about, like, we heard from the kids about mum and dad, we looked at some of the research about that. Let's look at some of the research about churches, remembering that the people that are responsible for all of these 6 things is the whole church, not a group of people. Yeah. The first thing is, we'll start with the light green, keychain leadership, which means what? Instead of all the services, all the decisions and everything being made by 2 or 3 people, young people feel empowered, which means they're given keys. And I think a lot of our churches do a good job of that. It's just saying that's a good thing. Keep doing that. Yeah. Not surprisingly, empathy, which means what? Instead of judging or criticizing, stepping into the shoes of this generation. Yeah. Stepping into the shoes of our generation, like you've just said through your comments, and understanding where they're at. Number 3 was interesting. Churches that took the message of Jesus very seriously are the ones that kept the young people. What that means is, instead of just giving content, they actually embodied what it means for us to live the message of Jesus properly. Maybe if we have time, I could use a small example of that from the book. Number 4, again, we have the W word, warm relationships. And they found that what's a lot more important at churches than programs, activities, is warm relationships. But this is the interesting one. Warm intergenerational relationships, which means not with people only my age. They found that churches that isolate young people from anyone older or younger than them, the young people end up leaving at one stage. But they found that churches that integrate them into different ages, which we could call the body of the Lord, the body of Christ, the church, they stay. For example, you know how sometimes we say, let's have a liturgy just for the kids on Sunday? A lot of these churches have found that when you do that, it has a very negative effect. Why? Because worship is intergenerational. School is the only place, school is the one that invented that your whole experience of school is with people that are born in the same year as you. Church is not like that. So Sunday school, we have that because it's more practical to do that. But again, if their experience of church is only Sunday school, they're not going to get warm relationships. Yeah. So the motto they said is warm is the new cool. Things don't have to be flashy, attractive as much as they need to be warm. And let's think about it. Who of us doesn't want to go to a place that's warm? If you know there are a bunch of people that are warm and kind and welcoming, why wouldn't you want to go? And the 5th one, prioritizing young people and families everywhere. Instead of saying that young people matter and not actually doing something about it, looking for ways to actually involve them. And I think this one is one that we have to really think about. A lot of times we say the youth are very important. Well, if we actually mean that, then we need to employ more empathy, but we also need to prioritize young people everywhere. Now, someone might say, but hold on, what about the rest of the congregation? So this is the interesting thing. They found that churches that do this and energize young people being defined as 15 to 30, those churches that energizing that 15 to 30 has a flow-on effect. The elderly are energized and the children are energized. They found that if this group of people are committed to the faith, have responsibility in the church, feel like they belong, the adults in that church, the grandparents, the grandmothers, the seniors, the middle-aged people all feel connected. And the final one is be best neighbors, which I know we struggle with our parking, but they actually mean be best neighbors as in churches that look beyond their walls. So they found that churches that focus just on who comes to their church don't keep young people as much as churches that care about those outside of the wall. Christian and non-Christian, either locally, as in our suburb, or globally, an initiative that's happening overseas or somewhere. Yeah. So they found that these 6 ingredients, if they're there in a church environment, young people are more likely to be engaged in the faith. What's interesting is all of this is if we're going to use the word cultural, it's cultural. I don't mean cultural as in ethnically cultural, but it's the culture of the church as opposed to the programs. So this isn't about making Sunday school or youth meeting better. It's about the community of the church embodying this. It's about everyone in living the gospel through these. Yeah. Any thoughts on that? Anything interesting, surprising?
Sorry, Abuna, it's Jackie. I was just going to comment about the warm relationships. If we look at our youth who've left maybe our particular congregation or even our denomination in the past, what drew them elsewhere is the warm, welcoming, non-judgmental environment. And we often hear this so many times, especially with Protestant churches and things like that. Someone always acknowledges them, takes time, cares about them. It's really, I think, one of the main reasons where they go elsewhere in so many times, and because they can find the opposite in their own environment. So, and it's not about the doctrine or what facilities, it's just that warm space, that welcoming space.
Warm relationships, very, very important for sure. And what's interesting, if we go back to the parents part, is they found that kids that go off, they're more likely to come back in a warm family. And let's apply that to church. If I venture off the faith, but there's always a warm congregation to come back to, yeah. Like one of the youth was saying a story about Abuna Macarius when he passed away, which is that when she finished year 12, she went to another church, another parish, Coptic parish, yeah, to a youth meeting and liturgy, yeah, her friends were there. And you know how sometimes youth at church get a little bit territorial, like, how come you don't come to church anymore? And they started making, like, when she would come, like, you still know Jesus? Do you know who Jesus is? This is the cross, yeah? Or that, you know, this is the church, this is how you walk in. And Abuna Macarius, when he used to say that, like they say in front of Abuna, he'd be like, no, she's beautiful, she's lovely, you know, she loves Jesus. From what he did is he kept the warmth, and she naturally, you know, because of that warmth, she was able, when she was no longer practically able to go to the other church, she said, yeah, I'll come to St. Mary's. Why? Because there was a person there that was warm. But if her experience of church was, how come you're going there? You shouldn't go there. You know, that territorialism that I think is gone, but, you know, sometimes exists. That's not a warm experience. And the same with, for example, we could apply it to anything. You know, as a youth in my faith journey, if I am questioning, not coming to church, if I'm a deacon and I don't want to wear a deacon, and then I come and I don't experience that warmth, then when I sort of, you know, wake up and be like, I should go to church, it's going to be the inner block. It's going to be like, but, you know, I don't want the comments. Yeah. And some people say, you know, like, I don't want to go to church because everyone's going to tell me, you know, you used to be a deacon with your dad, but you're not a deacon anymore. You know, like, why don't you wear tonya? And they're like, no, it's not warm enough for me. But I agree. I think warmth is a really, really big ingredient. Any other thoughts on any of this? Okay. I apologize for the timing. It's 8:30. I'll just go through, you know, a couple more things. Let's look at what the teenagers said when we asked them, what is the most important thing that the adults in your church, the congregation, servants and priests can do now? Again, a lot of this is not about Sunday school or youth meeting, as you could see. Sunday school or youth meeting is one place where this can happen. This is bigger than that. Like when we put the responsibility of the raising of the faith in the church environment on Sunday school or youth meeting, then it becomes an impossible task, because that's a program. A program cannot give what the whole church gives. Yeah. What did they say? What do they want from the church? A 16-year-old teenager. Speak to me about your experiences. How did God work in your life? What's something you could tell me about the presence of God in your life? Do you have any prayers that have been answered? It's nice. 17. Keep having conversations. Our issues feel validated when they are consistently recognized. Remove the stigma behind teenagers being messed up or facing issues that are deemed unimportant. Treat us as equal members in the body of Christ. Our youth doesn't mean we should be treated like babies. I feel way more grounded in my faith and my community because of the conversations I'm able to have with my servants, who consistently make me feel like my opinion is valid and don't talk down to me. Feeling respected helps me open up more and be willing to have those conversations about my faith. It's a really nice one. 16. They could talk about things that the world confuses us with, like spiritual battles, which we may face but don't know how to deal with through Christ, like addiction to porn or swearing with friends, because if the church doesn't talk about it because it seems too confronting, then we will believe what the world tells us. Pray for us. Have a good relationship with God themselves. Let that shine through them onto us. Very mature from a 17-year-old. 24, fellowship, communicate with us more. Be the change you want to see. 19, be themselves, not some pious image of a Christian that is altered between weekends and church visits. Children and older youth aren't dumb. They know what's an act for the most part. The adults at church should practice the inner life and present their genuine selves as the ones they serve, to the ones they serve. If they're worried about which of their Sunday school kids will see their social media, they're probably putting on a facade. 20. If adults are warm and non-judgmental, again, the warm words, yeah? I believe children will have a natural attraction to that warmth, making the kids know that they are cared for. 16. Teach by example. If each person focuses only on themselves and being true reflections of the love and light of Christ, we will experience the love of God through every interaction we have with others, and this will inspire us to be the same. Support me no matter what stage of my spiritual journey I'm on. I think this is the last one. Continue. This was a very powerful one, I think, from a 22-year-old. So continue increasing opportunities for the Eucharistic gathering as part of the liturgy. Continue actively participating in this Eucharistic gathering, fellowship, and spiritual growth together in Christ. Teenagers observing adults in the same way they engage with other adults, encouraging each other continually in their growth in Christ will imitate them as their role models. Teenagers often seek a sense of belonging. Watch this. So if adults leave the Eucharistic gathering, it may be difficult for teenagers to participate in this fellowship with others from an early age. And it's an opportunity lost for growing together in Christ and receiving and giving encouragement to the spiritual journey. What are they trying to say? Please don't leave the youth to be by themselves at church. We want you to be around. Yeah. They're saying, we want to be in fellowship with the rest of the church. When you see the youth, don't say, "Khalas, I'm going to go home." No, stay, be around. They don't just be a presence in that space. Lastly, involve us in the service as teenagers so that we learn the importance of serving God and the community from a young age. So again, I just tried to unpack what are they saying, and please jump in if you have any thoughts on this. They want role modeling and authenticity. So being authentic in my spiritual walk, warmth, empathy, meet them where they are on their journey, involving them in service. And involving in service also comes with a great deal of patience because, of course, as we grow up, sometimes we're not as committed, sometimes we might make mistakes, but that's okay. You know, as one priest once said, if involving the youth means that we're going to have a broken window at church every week, I would rather have a broken window at church every week and youth than have no youth at church. Yeah. Invite conversation, be present, allow us to experience the church. They're telling the congregation, we just want you there. And I always wonder, if I could just, share this, if our teenagers, their experience is I go to liturgy and I leave within 5 minutes after, they don't get that. Yeah. And if that means that it's hard to do in the first liturgy because it's early and cold, then maybe it's worth coming to the later liturgy, where there are other adults that are actually standing in the courtyard and talking together. Yeah. Okay. Let's get to the last part. But before we go there, any comments, questions, thoughts, elaborations so far?
Yes, Abuna. Sometimes I feel awkward if I go and say hello to teenagers who are standing and talking together. I feel that I don't belong. It's actually our problem, not their problem. I'm the aunt.
What's very interesting is I think they're sometimes awkward as well. So that's okay. We could all be awkward together. To be honest, I think they really value that. It's because
can I say something?
We're warm. Yes, please.
I was gonna say, Tant, can I say from someone who grew up in St. Mary's since before I could walk, I know it seems like that, like we get awkward, you get awkward, but you'd actually be surprised. As I grew older, they were the interactions I actually remembered. Like I can't tell you anything from, church growing up. But what I did remember was like, Tasoni Yos coming up to us and asking us about our day. Amu Meher, Yoshi's dad, asking us about our day. So I know it seems awkward and we probably didn't appreciate it at the time, but as we got older, they were the memories, and we really did appreciate the older generation actually coming to us and socializing with us.
Got it.
Very encouraging.
You're in trouble.
I think as well, Tans Margaret, don't underestimate the Orban line, and even just a smile or like a nice Teishu at Sully or live and pray, as Buna Michael always says, and how that impacts like just that warmth. It doesn't have to be a conversation, and how that impacts the youth. And similarly to Diana, I definitely have felt that. And just the Orban line, it's just something so simple.
Beautiful.
Sorry
Thanks.
for interrupting.
No, it's beautiful. Thank you. Please, like the more sharing, the better. Anyone else want to add anything? Someone just sent me a message saying, I've experienced this when I called one of the youth a couple of days ago. She was so appreciative and over the moon because of this call. Someone asked, what about connecting our children to church while in lockdown, especially with the liturgy? Like just a couple of quick thoughts on that. I think, I know a lot of the young people don't connect with the liturgy virtually, and personally I'm with them. Like when I'm not praying on Sunday, because there's a limit on how many people could be on Sunday, so there's a bit of a roster, I struggle to watch the liturgy or attend virtually because it's made to be attended face to face. Now, of course, some people though can connect with it virtually, which is fine. It's beautiful, but some people can't, which is fine as well. And I know some families, instead of that, what they do is they just read the readings, say the creed, sing one of the hymns from the liturgy, and then that's the Sunday until they get back. Yes, we could just do what we can in lockdown, but don't stress if they don't want to connect virtually with the liturgy, because it's really hard. It's very hard to just like, for some people connect with it, which is beautiful as well, but I think everyone's a bit different. All right, let's bring it all together. And again, I apologize about the length that we're going, the length of time. So please forgive me for that. How can the church and the heart and the home work together? So someone once likened it to this: the church is the light, the lighthouse, the home is the heart, and they work together. Yeah. By church, we mean the whole church. Sorry, I think someone's microphone is just.
Sorry, no, I don't know. I was just going to ask, can you please repeat that?
Repeat what? Which part's saying that?
Yeah, I think you said something about the heart. The church.
The church. Yeah, sorry. The church is the lighthouse, and the home is the heart. Yeah. So the home is like the heart. Yeah, I guess is the way to say it. But the heart and the church is the lighthouse. So the home is like where home base is, the center, where everything sort of comes together. By church, though, we mean church, not Sunday school or youth group. Okay. I think it's really, really important that we outline that. Church is the body. We are all members of that body, and we all have a role, not only the servants. All of us have a role together. Yeah. Okay, so I think someone's microphone is on. If they could just mute it, would be great, please, just because it just reverbs a little bit. Okay. Sorry, I think Sharif microphones might be on. Sorry, that's okay, no problem. Thank you. Just because the reverb. Thanks, Sharif. So let's bring it all together. What they're saying to adults of the church and what they're saying to parents, what our kids said in this survey, and put them on two columns. Yeah, what are they saying to the church? Please role model and be authentic. Be there. Be present. Allow us to experience the church. Don't go home. Stay, be with us. Warmth, empathy, meet us where we are. Involve us in the service, invite conversation. What are they saying to the home? Role model. Bring the church into the home, and lockdown has really shown how possible that is. Warmth, empathy. Take us to church, yeah? More than Sunday morning. So the beautiful thing about the Orthodox Church is we have thousands of opportunities for worship that are a lot more than the Sunday morning. Ashaya, for example, is a really good one. And a lot of the youth attend Ashaya because it's before youth meeting, but that's the first time they've ever attended Ashaya, apart from if they attend it maybe on camp or in Sunday school. But what if it was a family event? What about Kiyak? Kiyak sometimes is one of those things that's forgotten. What would it look like for the whole family to come to that, yeah? And then they're saying to the parents, invite conversation. Now, of course, there are things mom and dad can do that the church can't do. And there are things that the church can do that mom and dad can't do. The church can never replace the home. And the home can never replace the church. The church can never make a kid read their Bible every day because we don't live with them. What we can do, though, is provide them resources and an environment for that. We could visit them. We could ask about them. Yes, we might be able to pick up some kids, but it's not the same as when they're coming together. Everyone has a role, yeah, but they work together. Let's look at this Venn diagram that sort of, I brought everything together and just sort of said, where's the overlap? So what's the overlap? What do we both do as church and family? Warmth, empathy, presence, so being involved in their life, role modeling and dialogue. But then in church, which is the yellow, the church's role is to provide the experience of worship. A beautiful environment for us to experience the wonder and awe and glory of God through the beautiful worship of the Orthodox Church. The church provides an opportunity to live out the faith. That's through the various activities that the church may do, the various services that people get involved in. The experience of community. Who is the church, by the way? All of us. It's not a group of people that are doing, no, it's every single one of us here. The church is a place to meet adults. The church is a place that gives mentoring to the kids through the servants. Remember that ratio 5:1? So if I want my kid to have 5 adults, what if I say, okay, then I have to be an adult to another kid? Yeah. The family, we have the family warmth, bringing to church, the church at home, I should have written that. Organic faith conversations. So as we were saying before, just the general conversations in the car, over the dinner table, support on the journey. Yeah. Putting all that together, then all of us as a church, we're faithing together. We're on a journey together. And that journey is never a straight line. It's like, starts off here and goes like this. And by God's grace, eventually we make it. Yeah. Now, of course, it goes without saying that God's grace and the work of the Holy Spirit is active and alive in all of this. None of this denies that. All this says is, I personally think, if someone is really living the Christian life, they're organically warm, they're organically empathetic, they're organically role modeling, they're organically present. It's so natural for them. Yeah. So the role of the Holy Spirit, the role of grace, of course, is there. All this is, you know, after listening to some people and listening to the people who listen to others, this is some things that are nice to keep in mind. Okay. So again, we want to connect it all with what we believe, what the research says, because they've listened, analyzed, interpreted, and our experience to say from here, what now? What now for me as a priest or a servant? What now for me as a May? For the person who's in front of me, not for youth in general, no, for Mina or Marianne or Mary or John, for the actual person. Yeah. And if we could just summarize all of that with a nice model, if you remember Ephesians chapter 4 that we read in the first hour of the Agbeya, we're worthy of the calling with which you are called. Lord, one faith, one baptism, just a little together through. You have the individual church. the Sunday school. It's the Eucharist. Helps us and I get there. And what do I mean by that? Getting there is to say that church, more than to anything, the altar is where we, which means that I belong to, not to year 7 youth meeting or to the seniors meeting. No, I belong to the body. And those gatherings, the year 7 Sunday school is a beautiful place where I meet who love me, who role model the faith. But then we live it out. If I want to live out the altar, then I need to be empathetic. If I want to live out the altar, then I need to be warm because we kiss when we're there. If I'm or irritable and wanted to send him away, he said, bring him here to me. Then he took charge of him, and by his long suffering, he cured him. I think personally for me, Ava Isidore is a good example of embodying all of that. Yeah. You could see here that Ava Isidore is not trying to fix people. He's just, if you want to read more, please buy this book. You could find it in Korong and Burwood. Growing With. This one's for parents. It goes through the journey of teens and youth and young adults and how the family can help them as they grow in faith and also as they grow in their future, especially with kids that move out of home after year 12 if they're studying somewhere far from uni. Let's stop there. Again, I apologize for the time. I didn't actually think it was going to go for that long, so forgive me to take up this much of your time. I'd love to hear people's thoughts, elaborations, and I'm sure you guys have a lot to add. Any questions or anything, whatever you have time for.
Thank you very much, Abuna. That was awesome. Thank you.
No, thanks, Doc. Honestly, just other people's things coming together. Just hoarding, copying.
I have a question, Abuna. For teenagers, their friends are everything for them. And when an issue happens with Sunday school relationships, those kids don't want to go to church anymore, don't want to go to mass because they're going to meet them there and they become separated from church and just belong to the friends from school who sometimes are not the best kind of friends. How do we solve this problem?
I think that's a really good point, Doc, because I think that's one of the drawbacks of Sunday school is that we put people in every age. Now, the Sunday school has a lot of good things, of course, but one of the things we've got to watch out for is if my experience of church is my year level and I have a kerfuffle with my year level, which is very normal as a teenager, and then I feel like I don't belong to the friendship group, it's really hard. So I feel like we've got to look for opportunities to connect our young people, both as servants and as families, with the rest of the body. People that are, they could be still teenagers, but older and younger. Other people in the church that are not just in the year level. And I think a lot of the times, you see that in youth group, because they're not in age like year 7, 8, 9, 10, that sometimes a lot of youth end up being friends with people they never thought they would be friends with. Like an 18-year-old is suddenly like best friends with a 25-year-old, and 25-year-old's getting married and the 18-year-old's on his bridal party. So sometimes that sort of has a way of figuring it out. The same way at school. At school, there's a lot of teenage, friendship dynamic issues, cliques, as some people like to use that word. So I guess we got to look for opportunities to connect them with people outside of their year level, and also have some hope and confidence that as they mature, they actually end up forming friendships with people that they may never have thought to form friendships with. I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts on that. I'm sure people have some ideas on that. Any other thoughts, comments, وفاء؟
سلام يا وسونا. معلش انا عندي كومنت على حكايه انه السيرفنت يعني يقولوا مش هتحصل لما بابا وماما يقولوا لكم ان شاء الله يعني نعمل I get very angry بصراحة و get upset. قلت له it's written in the Bible. حتى يعني ممكن دكتور أميري correct me لو أنا understand this verse wrong. الآية بتقول كده لما تقول
عوض أن تقولوا
عوض الكومنتس بتاع التينيجر قال احنا عايزين نعرف الاكسبيرينس بتاعتك مع ربنا تبقى خلاص بقى كل السيرفنت من النهارده احنا خدنا جرين لاين من ابونا انه نحكي خبراتنا مع ربنا للعيال او للكيدز يعني.